first question, please. Gentlemen, I hope you can both hear me. Yes? Channel 4. I think it's 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope both of you got the sound. Good. All right. There's a question at the back. Microphone, please. Hi, good morning. For the director, I'd like to know what was your childhood like? What's your childhood like? Because whether you had a bad time at your childhood seeing your films, would you wanted to reflect your bad childhood in the cinema? Or what's all that about?
My childhood was, it was a sort of dysfunctional in that respect. My father is not hugely dissimilar from the character in the film. Yeah, this one okay? Excuse me. But it wasn't as bad as is presented in the film. The film's not autobiographical. It's not. If you're doing an autobiography, you're obliged to show a certain level of factual truth, and the film's fiction, clearly fictional. But yes, a lot of some of the shape of the film would be close to my experience, but it wasn't as bad as in the film. It was worse, actually.
Es realmente, voy a preguntar yo una cuestión que se me ocurrió viendo la película.
A question, the atmosphere. Yes, he's going to ask a question. I would like to know whether the atmosphere of these young gangs is as bad as in Glasgow, in the industrial cities of Glasgow, where there's so many young kids in gangs. Is it such a serious social problem? That's what I would like to know. All of these young gangs fighting each other and all these thugs. Is that such a serious problem in the industrial cities in Scotland now? Is that what you're trying to reflect? Or?
Yeah, the problem is still as bad, sadly. It kind of comes and goes, doesn't it?
Certainly is.
Every 6 or 7 years it seems to flare up again, then it sort of dies down somewhat. I'm not quite sure why it's as bad as it is, but it's in every big city in Scotland and in England, and to be honest, probably around Europe. But it's tribal and it's territorial, and knife crime in Scotland and in England, knife crimes is on the rise. It's pandemic, and sadly that always seems to have been the case. I read a story. I wrote most of the script in a local library, and I read a story about 2 kids who had witnessed a fight. They were 11 years old, and they'd witnessed a fight between 2 older lads, and they supported one of the older lads, and he got beat in this fight, this fist fight. And the older lad, the victor of this particular fight, went chasing after these 2 11-year-old kids and beat one of them to death with a brick. And it happened in Edinburgh, and it happened in 1893. So over 100 years ago, an act of kind of random violence was prevalent in Scotland even then. So why, we're a very friendly country, I think. We're a very friendly people. But why we have this flip side of violence, I don't honestly know where that comes from. Would you say?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
In the film, there's a certain malcontent that studies don't overcome the existing violence. He's a very good student in the film, and even when he's in that violent situation, he continues to read and study all the way to the end of the film. Do you believe that violence exceeds study and education? Is that what you're trying to say there?
I think that a lot of films portray youth culture in a simplistic fashion. and it's never that simple. I worked for a long time in prisons after I left university, and when you work in prisons, you see all forms of humanity, and it's never as simple as this guy's a killer or this guy's a thug. They read books, they listen to opera, they know their classical music. Glasgow, per head of population, has the highest going opera attendances in Europe. So again, there's all these contradictions that go on. But I'm definitely convinced that if we are to find any kind of solution to the gang culture, if you like, in my own country and abroad, then education, obviously, is a key to it. You know, but the right form of education, not necessarily academia, but in terms of the environment within the schools. Because in the 70s especially, all around you was nothing but violence. Your parents were violent, which was not uncommon. School teachers were violent, and it was institutionalized violence. The police were violent. The priesthood was violent. So all around you were surrounded by violence. And it was and remains sadly very difficult to not be drawn into it. It's difficult to steer clear of your peers. You know, you get drawn in, and it's very hard to try and keep away from it. Would you say so, Connor?
Definitely.
Your turn. Say something.
Well, it's inevitable that you're going to end up getting involved with something, but just it's always easier to get into it than to get out of it.
Allá atrás, por favor.
Question at the back. Hi, good morning. I would like to ask Connor, the actor, how many people do you know that are very similar to the character you portray in the film? How many people do you know personally?
There's a lot of people that not so much like John, but that are like that do go out and gang fight. So they're not just the same really when they go out. They're not just. John's different because John is, while he was gang fighting, he doesn't want to do it, but he still does do it, which is a shame. But there's a lot of people, not a lot of people, there's a few people I know that do it, sadly.
Further questions? What draws my attention, the football games abroad, the Brits, for example, are known as playing against cities that play against a British team, for example, abroad in Europe. It turns out that they're always afraid in those cities because the skinheads and so on and so forth cause a lot of havoc. And one goes to the UK, goes to England, and you see that British style of well-educated, exquisite, educated people. That contradiction exists, and could that be the reason that that same British type of education, which is so strict, perhaps has produced that violence in that other sector of people, like the skinheads and the hooligans that go abroad and cause havoc in the football matches?
So I understand the question. So Do you mean is the education system really is the way in which kids are taught is what produces that kind of violence? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, perhaps the strictness of the education I think he was referring to.
Well, I've been reading recently about the French education system as being particularly strict. Oh, you don't get the translation?
Que repita la pregunta.
Sí.
Bien.
He's going to repeat the question. When a team, a Spanish team, a football team, in your city plays against a British team, and there are security measures because of the British fans. One goes to the UK, Scotland, or to Wales, or wherever, to London, and one sees an exquisite education in the manners of the people, sometimes a bit Victorian. But I'm wondering whether that British type of English education, that perfect indication, quote unquote, if you want to use a word, on the other hand, could this bring about the consequence of the skinheads and the football matches, and that may create a style of violence that the character in the film ends up getting involved in?
No, I don't think the schools are entirely to blame. The thing that I realised in the course of writing the script was that it's a cocktail between your culture, your background, your family, your class, as well as how that comes into conflict with the system, be it in education or be it the police or the priesthood. So no, I don't think it's purely down to schooling, but definitely within the schools is where young men and young women will gather, and within that environment, those violent instincts will take place. But it's mainly, I would say, it's mainly out in the street where you have a parallel education going on. I mean, in that respect, in the film, to have an older brother who's a somebody in the gangs is useful in the street, but obviously not so useful at school. And John, the character, is discriminated against at school because of this brother. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that you have this parallel existence, because in the street you come up with your own kind of rules, as it were, your own hierarchies, your own chosen enemies, your own way of exerting the testosterone that's driving you crazy at that kind of age. But I think the schools now, I definitely think the schools could and should address the issue, but I don't think it would happen within the classroom. I think it has to happen. It has to happen in the street and at home. But then how do you police a household? You know, it's a broad-based education is what we need, more than anything.
We have had the pleasure in having Peter Mullan as an actor and Peter Mullan as a director. What are your projects now? I mean, next time you are preparing something as an actor or something as a director?
Just now I'm filming with Mr. Spielberg over in deepest, darkest England. And after that I'm going to start writing the next film, which at the moment looks like I'm going to do a film on Hurricane Katrina at the moment. Whether I'm the right person to do it, I'm not so sure. Whether the time has passed for it, I'm not so sure. But at the moment, that would be the next film I'd be writing.
Bien, más preguntas, por favor.
Further questions?
No questions. Allí sí, por favor. Allí alguien quiere preguntar.
Yes, there's a question at the back. Hi, I would like to know whether you see you're giving any message of hope in the film that you've shown today, that's premiered today here in San Sebastian.
There is a message of hope in it. If there's a primary function for the film, I would be very, very happy if youngsters would get to see the film and maybe think twice about some of the things that they may do or may want to do. If there is any hope, it's that you can come through bad times in your childhood and accept the consequences of what you've done and live with it and hopefully become a better person for it, regardless of what you may or may not have done. So if there is a sort of hopeful element to the film, it would be that.
The last question, please. Una última pregunta.
congratulations for your portrayal. The scene of the drunk father is great, by the way, how you portrayed the role. When you direct the actors, and in this case, Connor, I'll ask a question in a moment for Connor. Are you interpreting or playing all of the roles or not as a director? And I would like to ask Connor whether he learned, whether you learned your acting with Peter. Okay.
And everything from me. No, with actors, I just let them do their thing, and I point a camera at them. I swear it's as simple as that. I like actors to feel free, and they can live and breathe, and hopefully enjoy themselves. And a camera's just there to capture those moments. I don't micromanage. I wouldn't tell an actor how exactly he should play a scene. But I remember with Connor especially, because he's so good, you would only have to give Connor the thought in his head. As long as he knew why the character, or what the character may or may not be thinking, then Connor would just go and do it. I wouldn't have to show him how to, and I would never dare do such a thing. He just, because he's so good, he just has the thought in his head and he just runs with it.
Well, Peter was excellent to work with, because he wasn't on your back. He wasn't like that. As you said, he would give you the thought, and then you would do it. But if you needed advice, he was always there, which was great. Excellent to work with.
Muy bien.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.